Smoke was sliding down the glass staircase when Ivara Thorne tried to lift herself and realized her legs would not answer. Executives crowded the landing above her. The nearest exit was filling with gray haze. She told the building technician kneeling beside her to save himself. Single father Everin Calder did not lift her. One wrong movement could turn a spinal injury into permanent damage. He steadied her neck, made her follow the bright orange bracelet his daughter had braided around his wrist, and searched the wall beside the stairs. That was when he noticed the red inspection tag hidden behind a locked evacuation chair cabinet. He had attached that tag 3 days earlier after the fire door failed. Someone had removed it before the launch. Everin opened the cabinet with his emergency key, secured Ivara to the rescue sled, and guided her below the smoke with 2 trained staff members. By nightfall, surgeons were fighting to protect her spine. By morning, the discarded tag would force an entire board to ask why a reported danger had been made invisible. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Everin Calder trusted buildings only after he had seen how they failed. At 39, he inspected fire doors, alarms, refuge areas, and evacuation equipment for high-rise offices across the city. He had worked 12 years as a paramedic before night shifts, and grief made the job impossible to carry home. Now he raised his 9-year-old daughter, Sorrel, and spent his days asking doors to close, batteries to hold, and confident people to imagine the worst 5 minutes of their lives. 3 days before the grand opening of Thorne Meridian's new headquarters, Everin tested the glass atrium staircase. The building was designed to impress. Pale stone, 30 feet of glass, and hidden speakers. At the center of the launch would be the company's new emergency power system, built to keep elevators, exit lighting, and medical equipment running during a grid failure. Everin did not admire the locked evacuation chair cabinet on the second-floor landing. The cabinet key issued to security did not fit. The magnetic fire door beside it also failed to close when the alarm released it. A temporary lighting cable had been routed across the upper landing beneath a thin strip of gray tape. Everin failed all 3 items. He attached a red inspection tag to the cabinet handle, photographed the fire door standing open, and sent the report to Facilities Management and the Independent Opening Committee. The facilities vice president called within 10 minutes. He said the cabinet would be rekeyed, the door adjusted, and the cable rerouted before Thursday. Then he asked Everin to remove the red tag because investors would tour the atrium that afternoon. When the equipment passes, the tag comes off, Everin said. It makes a finished building look unsafe. Right now it is. The vice president ended the call without saying goodbye. Everin was used to that. At home that evening, Sorrel braided orange cord around his wrist while he reviewed the report. She had inherited her mother's patience for small knots, and none of Everin's tolerance for vague answers. "Why orange?" he asked. "So I can find you if the lights go out." Everin tightened the bracelet gently. His late wife Lena had died from an aggressive illness 4 years earlier, not from a dramatic accident. Grief had arrived through hospital parking receipts, half-finished school forms, and one side of the bed becoming unnecessary. Sorrel remembered her mother as a warm voice and a collection of bright scarves. Everin remembered everything. He promised to wear the bracelet during Thursday's opening. Ivara Thorne arrived at the headquarters before sunrise that morning. She was 35, chief executive of the emergency power company her mother had founded in a rented industrial unit. Under Ivara, it had expanded into hospitals, public housing, and transit stations. She was also exhausted. The new headquarters had exceeded its budget. A public transit contract depended on the launch. Her mother was recovering from a stroke, and 2 board members believed Ivara's insistence on accessibility features had made the building unnecessarily expensive. If Thursday failed, those directors planned to separate the emergency systems division and sell it. By 8:30, the atrium filled with investors, engineers, city officials, and employees' families. Ivara wore a graphite blazer dress with copper detailing and black pumps. Her dark copper hair was drawn into a long, polished braid. She moved through the crowd with practiced calm, though she had slept less than 3 hours. Everin checked the staircase. The red inspection tag was gone. The evacuation cabinet now opened with his emergency key, but the assigned security key still stuck. The fire door closed halfway, then dragged against the stone floor. The temporary lighting cable remained beneath gray tape near the upper landing. Everin notified the opening committee and recommended closing the staircase. The facility's vice president told him the final correction would happen after the presentation. "People can use the other stairs for 1 hour," Everin said. "The cameras are pointed here. Cameras do not make it safe." The vice president ordered security to keep guests moving and walked away. Everin placed a portable barrier at the upper landing. Someone moved it before the keynote. At 10:15, Ivara stepped onto the presentation platform beneath a suspended model of the company's emergency battery core. She spoke about power as a promise, hospitals staying open, elevators returning to safe floors, families reaching illuminated exits. Everin stood near the staircase with a radio clipped to his dark utility jacket. The demonstration began. Main lights dimmed. Emergency strips illuminated the floor. A backup battery cabinet behind the platform accepted the simulated load. For 6 seconds, everything worked. Then Everin smelled hot insulation. The cabinet emitted a sharp electrical crack. Smoke pushed from its rear vent. The fire alarm sounded, and the magnetic doors released. The atrium crowd turned at once. Most people moved toward the ground floor exits. Guests on the mezzanine rushed for the glass staircase because it was closest and most visible. Ivara left the platform to direct them. She reached the upper landing as the fire door stuck halfway open. Smoke entered the stairwell behind her. Someone struck the temporary lighting cable with a shoe. The gray tape rolled. Ivara's heel caught. She fell sideways, struck the rail, and landed hard across 3 stone steps. Everin reached her before the crowd did. He dropped to one knee and stopped an executive from pulling her upright. "Do not move her." Ivara was conscious. Her eyes were clear, but panic sharpened them. "My legs," she said. "I can't feel them." Everin placed both hands beside her head without twisting her neck. He asked her to breathe, tell him her name, and keep her eyes on the orange bracelet at his wrist. Smoke thickened above them. The people on the landing began backing away. Ivara looked toward the open fire door and understood the danger before anyone explained it. "Leave me," she whispered. "Get them out." Everin kept his voice level. "They are moving. I am staying." He radioed for emergency medical response and 2 trained evacuation wardens. Then he looked toward the cabinet. Behind its lower edge, caught between the wall and the baseboard, was a folded strip of red card. Everin recognized his inspection tag. The red tag changed the emergency before it changed the investigation. It reminded Everin that the evacuation cabinet had not passed inspection and that the security key might fail. He used the universal key on his own rescue ring instead. Inside was a stair evacuation sled with a rigid back support, head blocks, and bright blue restraint straps. Everin did not drag Ivara onto it alone. He directed 2 trained wardens to clear the landing and bring a spinal transfer board from the first aid room. They stabilized her neck, rolled her only as a coordinated unit, and secured her body without bending her back. Everin explained every movement before it happened. The smoke layer lowered. Ivara gripped the orange bracelet while he fastened the final strap. "Sorrel made it," he said, giving her one ordinary fact to hold. "She is 9. She thinks orange is impossible to lose." Ivara focused on the braid. The team guided the sled down the protected side of the staircase, while firefighters entered through the main atrium. At the ground floor, paramedics took over. Everin gave them the fall height, the point of impact, the loss of sensation, and every movement made during extraction. Ivara was transported within 11 minutes of the fall. The battery fire remained contained inside its cabinet. Sprinklers and firefighters prevented it from spreading. No one else suffered more than smoke irritation and bruises. Everin stood outside beneath the flashing emergency lights, soot darkening one sleeve, when the facility's vice president approached. "You deployed equipment from a failed cabinet." Everin looked at him. "I deployed working equipment from a cabinet your staff presented as approved." You should have closed the staircase. I recommended that in writing. The man's face tightened. You were responsible for the inspection. Everin reached for the red tag in his pocket. It was gone. He remembered placing it beside the cabinet while preparing the sled. In the smoke and movement, anyone could have picked it up. By noon, the company issued a brief statement describing an equipment malfunction and an unrelated stairway fall. Everin's inspection access was suspended pending review. At the hospital, imaging showed that Ivara had fractured 2 vertebrae and compressed her spinal cord. Surgeons operated that afternoon to stabilize her spine and relieve the pressure. The surgeon spoke carefully afterward. The injury was incomplete, which meant some nerve pathways remained. Recovery could include restored sensation and movement, but no honest person could promise how much or how quickly. When Ivara woke, she could move 2 toes on her right foot. She could not lift either leg. Ivara asked for the opening report. The board chair told her to focus on recovery. "The building failed while I was describing safety," she said. "Bring me the report." The first version contained no mention of Everin's red tag, the failed fire door, or the lighting cable. It said the staircase had been approved for limited use and suggested that Everin deployed an unverified rescue device without authorization. Ivara read the sentence twice. She remembered his hands holding her head still, while other people tried to lift her. She remembered him waiting for trained help rather than performing a reckless rescue for the cameras. She remembered the orange bracelet and the blue straps. "Where is his inspection?" she asked. No one answered directly. The next morning, Sorrel found the missing evidence. Everin had collected her from school after his suspension. She sat at his kitchen table while he reconstructed the timeline from emails and photographs. His original report had been sent to facilities management, but the opening committee's shared folder now contained a later version marked resolved. Sorrel watched the silent footage from a news camera filming across the atrium. "Pause," she said. Everin stopped the video. In the corner of the frame, minutes before the keynote, an event assistant crouched beside the evacuation cabinet. The assistant removed the red tag and passed it to the facility's vice president. He folded it and pushed it behind the cabinet base. Later footage showed Everin finding it. Another angle captured a firefighter picking the tag up from the step and placing it inside a clear evidence pouch. Everin contacted the fire investigator, not the press. The investigator confirmed that the tag had been logged with debris from the stairwell. Its handwritten time matched Everin's original photograph. The fire door had scrape damage consistent with failing before the incident, and the temporary cable was still taped across the landing. The battery cabinet's cooling fan connector had not been seated during last-minute installation. The final load test that should have caught it had been shortened from 40 minutes to 8. Ivara had approved a compressed opening schedule. She had not ordered anyone to falsify an inspection, hide a tag, or shorten a safety test. But the facility's vice president had learned what kind of news reached her desk. Good news moved quickly. Delays arrived as solved problems. Ivara had built that habit through impatience. From her rehabilitation room, she requested an independent investigation and gave the committee full access to her messages. She also ordered the company to preserve every report and camera file. Everin was invited to give evidence through outside counsel. He did not enter Ivara's hospital room. He did not want gratitude to confuse the record. They spoke once by video with attorneys present. Ivara sat upright in a wheelchair, a charcoal shawl over her shoulders. Without the executive stage beneath her, she looked younger and far more tired. "You told them not to move me," she said. "A spinal injury has to be protected. If you had listened when I told you to leave, you were frightened. That was not an operational instruction." For the first time since the fall, Ivara laughed. It lasted only a second, but it belonged to her. The investigation took 6 weeks. The facility's vice president admitted removing the tag because he feared the opening would be canceled. He had instructed staff to mark the staircase items resolved and shorten the battery test. He was dismissed for falsifying safety records and referred to regulators. The opening committee was dissolved. Two directors left oversight roles, and Ivara's authority over final safety certification transferred to an independent committee. Evren's suspension was lifted, but he declined to return under the old facilities structure. He proposed something harder, a public retest of every life safety system, including the equipment that had worked. Ivara approved it from rehabilitation. Recovery did not move like a triumphant montage. Some mornings, Ivara could lift her right knee 2 inches. On other mornings, pain erased the progress. She learned pressure relief, transfers, wheelchair balance, and how exhausting it was to enter a room where everyone had already decided what counted as hope. Her therapists did not promise that she would walk. They taught her to build a life before the answer arrived. Ivara returned to work remotely for limited hours and stopped allowing anyone to summarize unresolved safety issues as minor. Every report began with what had failed and what remained unknown. The public transit contract was delayed, not canceled. The city required a new audit. Thorn Meridian paid for it without contesting the cost. Evren led the headquarters retest as an independent consultant. He checked every fire door, refuge intercom, backup light, elevator recall, and evacuation device. Employees with disabilities participated in drills and were paid for their expertise. Evacuation chairs remained visible instead of hidden behind decorative panels. Refuge areas gained two-way communication and clear floor space. Temporary cables were banned from egress routes. Alarm tests could no longer be shortened by event staff or executives. Sorrel visited once after school. She wore an orange raincoat and inspected the new evacuation cabinet with the seriousness of a tiny regulator. Evren introduced her to Ivara in the ground floor rehabilitation garden. Ivara was using a lightweight graphite wheelchair. One foot rested slightly differently from the other because movement had begun returning on her right side. "You made the bracelet," Ivara said. Sorrel examined the braid around her father's wrist. It worked. It did. Sorrel did not ask whether Ivara would walk again. She asked whether the building had enough orange signs. Ivara considered the question. Not yet. Evren watched Ivara listen to a child without turning her into a symbol. Something inside him shifted, but he did not name it. Professional distance still mattered. 3 months after the fall, the headquarters passed its independent retest. The result was published with the original failures and corrections. No names were printed as heroes. At the reopening, Ivara spoke from her wheelchair. She said pain was not a leadership lesson anyone should need. The lesson came from choices made before it, hiding a red tag, rewarding speed, and treating access as decoration. Then she handed the building certificate to the Employee Accessibility Council instead of hanging it in her office. Evren stood near the back with Sorrel. No one applauded him alone. The room applauded the people who had made the building safer. Ivara continued rehabilitation. By winter, she could stand between parallel bars and walk short distances with braces and forearm crutches. She still used her wheelchair for work, travel, and days when fatigue made walking impractical. The wheelchair represented distance, speed, and choice, not failure. His consulting contract ended after the final compliance review. He opened a small fire life safety practice in a former bicycle shop, with an orange inspection tag framed near the entrance, and Sorrel's homework occupying one corner of the conference table. Ivara waited until the contract was closed before contacting him personally. Her message contained no invitation hidden inside company business. She asked whether he wanted coffee at an accessible riverside cafe on Saturday. Evren read it while Sorrel built a tower from smoke detector boxes. "Is that the staircase lady?" she asked. "Her name is Ivara. Are you going?" Evren looked at the orange bracelet. "I think so." Their first coffee lasted 90 minutes. Ivara talked about her mother's recovery and the strange quiet of no longer controlling every hour. Evren talked about leaving paramedic work after Lena died. Ivara never called him brave. Evren never called her inspiring. They spoke as two adults whose lives had changed without asking permission. Ivara came to Sorrel's school engineering fair and used the ramped entrance without turning it into a statement. Evren attended a public meeting where Ivara answered difficult questions about the failed launch. He did not rescue her from criticism. She did not need him to. On one spring evening, they returned to the headquarters after the staff had gone. Ivara wanted to see the staircase without a committee around her. She rolled to the first landing, locked her wheelchair, and looked up through the glass atrium. The stone steps had been resurfaced with high-contrast edges. The fire door closed cleanly. The evacuation cabinet carried a bright orange seal that could be seen from across the floor. "I used to dream about this place," she said. "In the dream, everyone leaves, and I am still on the stairs." Evren stood beside her, not blocking the route. "What happens now?" "Now I know where the chair is." She smiled. Ivara transferred to a bench and took her forearm crutches from the chair. Evren did not reach for her until she asked. She climbed 4 steps. At the 5th, her right leg trembled. She stopped, breathed, and sat on the wide resting platform that had been added during renovation. Evren sat 1 step below. "I thought reaching the top would prove something," she said. "Does it?" Ivara looked at the elevator across the atrium, then at her wheelchair waiting safely below. "It proves I can choose tomorrow." That answer was enough. Nearly a year after the fall, Thorn Meridian hosted a public emergency design workshop in the atrium. There were no dramatic product reveals. Firefighters, wheelchair users, building staff, older residents, and parents tested equipment together. Sorel wore an orange volunteer vest and checked that cabinet keys matched their locks. Ivara moved confidently through the room in her wheelchair and stopped beside the glass staircase, where Evren was adjusting a refuge intercom. The orange bracelet on his wrist had faded almost gold. "Still impossible to lose?" she asked. "So far." Ivara held out her hand. Evren took it. Above them, the fire door released during a scheduled test and closed completely. The evacuation cabinet opened on the first key. Clear lights marked every route out. Nothing about the moment looked shocking. That was the point. The building no longer depended on one man refusing to leave one woman behind. It had been changed so the next frightened person would not need a hero at all.